Hey, King TuT.
Good evening.
It's part 3 of your life story. Where we left off before, we said we was going to continue from the ages of 17 to 20. I do want to say that I started off wanting to make this a 4-part series, but your life is so complex that I feel like it's definitely going to be more parts to this. I just want you to feel comfortable today and just talk about a few periods of your life, a few things from that period of your life from the ages of 17 to 20. I want to start off with, how did you get your name King TuT?
King TuT or TuT?
King TuT.
King TuT, I was named King TuT by a police officer, a commanding officer.
I read the story, but it was always unclear because in the story that I read, it said that your mom went to the precinct when you were locked up. I guess you was underage, and they asked her what was your name, and she called you King TuT. But I don't think that was true. Am I correct?
No, it's not true.
Okay.
I was arrested as a juvenile while I was in the precinct. This was in 1977. The arresting officer, he had me, and he took me through all the things pertaining to the prints and everything. He asked me what was my name. I told him my name was Walter Johnson. Because I was an adolescent, I was a youth, he had to contact whoever was, in charge of me or responsible for me, which was my mom. And actually, thinking about that evening, what had happened is that I was with my brother and a friend. And when I got arrested, they were the ones who notified my mom. And my mom got in contact with the law enforcement. And when she came down there, to find out exactly what was happening. And she ended up giving the officers my information. And when she gave the officer my information, they asked her, did I go by any other name besides Walter Johnson? And she told them my name was TuT. And I tried to tell my mom, don't tell them my name is TuT. She slapped me. She told them my name is TuT. And the officer that had me under arrest told his commanding officer that my name was TuT. The commanding officer said that my name was King TuT. And my mother corrected him and told him that my name was not King TuT. My name is just TuT. And they got into a little misunderstanding. And then he explained to my mother that the reason why he said that my name was King TuT is because I'm TuT from Kings County. And just in case if there was another TuT from somewhere else or from the county of Queens, that's how they would identify me.
Okay.
So it was the police that gave me the name King TuT.
Thank you for clearing that up.
You're welcome.
All right. Now, around the age of 17, I want to ask you, is that around the time, because that's like a coming of age time for most adolescents. How did you start developing this reputation of being this notorious stick-up kid from Brooklyn, starting at 17?
Well, being from Brooklyn, sticking up during those years of my life was one of the number one things that guys from Brooklyn did. And the stick-up game was like, I guess, in Brooklyn, like the drug game would be in Harlem. You know, and I developed a name from sticking up. You know, I acquired the reputation from robbing other guys who were out in the street. Because back in those days, the only guys who really, you know, wore jewelry, wore, you know, expensive clothing and things of that nature was tough guys. You couldn't wear that stuff if you wasn't a tough guy. You know, you had to at least be in the streets, be willing to fight or do whatever you had to do for whatever you had. I mean, back in those days, if a person wore a spaghetti chain, it was taken from them. And it wasn't taken from you just because guys were robbers. But the guys who did rob felt that they were part of a group of individuals that only they deserve to wear it. It was one of those situations that if you couldn't protect it, and if you wasn't willing to go the distance in order to gain the respect that you had to gain for whatever you had, then you ain't had no business having it. And many times, you know, you have guys who would try to imitate and emulate other guys. And unfortunately, they fell victim and became prey.
So, your victims were not civilians. I'm getting from this is that you're saying that most of the times it was just like gangster on gangster.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in my youth, that's what we did. But you gotta remember, like, I'm from a project. And every project back then, especially in Brooklyn, you know, you had your little group of friends, and we aspired to be stick-up kids. We aspired for our name to ring bells. And to be honest, it's weird because I really, at a young age, didn't want to be a stick-up kid. You know, as I told you, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a Marine. I wanted to be a Panther. I wanted to be somebody who really helped other people. But there came a point in my life when I got things kind of like mixed up. I realized that to be a good guy made me pray. And to be a bad guy probably meant that I'd die at a young age. But it was about respect. It was about my family. And you know, most of the younger guys that I grew up with, they'd rather be the taker than be the one that was getting stuff taken from them. They'd rather be the predator than to be the prey. And it's a terrible choice to have to make, but that was the only choice my young mind could really comprehend making.
Okay. So now, I'm sure you have participated in various stick-ups, but there's one or a few that I've read about that I just was like, well, what would make him want to do that in such a large scale? And that was when I started reading about you robbing buses and trains. How did you get into that? What was that about?
Well, in my youth, we were just kids. and 8th, 9th grade, stuff like that. And we were going to school. And when we would go to school, we would encounter other kids. And encountering them are other people, Sometimes it wasn't. A lot of times, but it was a school thing. And when you go into school back and forth, you get on buses, you get on trains, and it might be 4, 3, 5 of y'all, and then there's another crew of guys on the train. Now the crew that you're looking at, it could be a steering contest. It could be somebody stepping on somebody's sneaker. It could just be that I'm from Brooklyn and you from another borough. And a situation would arise. And usually, if we had an argument with somebody or misunderstanding, it always resulted in robbery.
So, if you had a fight, after the fight, you're not leaving without taking something from that person.
Yeah.
Got you.
That's just how it was. That if I overpower you, what's yours is mine now. It was a way to deface somebody, and it was a way to let it be known that if by chance you and another human being had to come across paths, that is not just going to be a misunderstanding or a fight. I'm willing to take it a step beyond.
Okay. There was one incident on the bus.
Right.
That I heard about. And the way the story was told was that you got on the bus and commandeered the bus and robbed everybody on the bus. Could we talk a little bit about that?
That situation was actually a misunderstanding. We were coming from out in Queens, and we were on the bus. And there were some other guys who were also from Brooklyn who ended up being on the bus with us. And as we rode the bus, we actually finished committing some crimes out in Queens and was actually coming back to Brooklyn. And we encountered some other guys that were from another projects in Brooklyn. We got into a misunderstanding and we stuck them up. And we robbed the guys. It wasn't our intentions to commandeer the bus, but unfortunately the bus ended up changing routes due to the activity that was happening on the bus, and because of us doing what we were doing as far as the robbery.
Okay.
So it wasn't our intentions to just take the bus, but the bus driver, for the safety of other passengers who had nothing to do with it, he felt that it was necessary that he change his route, and that the bus wasn't commandeered, but in changing his route, we violated his job, because he has a job to go in accordance to his route. And because he felt that people on the bus were in danger, he changed it.
And when he changed his route, did it result in going back to the depot, the bus depot, or where did y'all go?
No, actually, he changed his route, and I believe he was trying to go to a precinct.
Okay.
With the bus. And we stopped him, and we left off the bus with the guys that we committed the crime against.
So y'all didn't rob the other pedestrians that were on the bus.
No,
it was simply okay. All right.
No, the guys that got robbed was other thugs like ourselves.
Got you.
From another part of Brooklyn.
You cleared up a lot, because I always thought that you guys were just jumping on mass transit vehicles and sticking up the mass transit vehicles. And I always said, well, how much was they getting? Because normally people that ride the bus is not carrying a lot of money.
Right.
So this makes a lot more sense to me now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you so much for clearing that up. So around the age period of what were you doing that when y'all was just like kind of just, because you still were in school when you was
Right.
seeing these people, so you was still about 17, 18?
Yes.
Okay.
But I went to school part-time, but I was a full-time stick-up kid. I stuck up other gangsters for guns, for jewelry. Back then, we'd take coats. We took, anything of value. Anything, and it was just a Brooklyn thing at that time when we were kids growing up. So if we seen somebody who had, my number one objective back then though was weaponry. I always pursue people for weapons.
Okay. So they would be armed, strapped,
Yes.
and you would pat them down to take their
Yes,
weapons.
I would approach a person who was armed with a firearm, and I would put my life as well as their life in danger. And I would let them know that I know they're armed, and I'm coming for what they have.
Because you got the drop on them before they
Yes.
could pull their weapon first.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes they had to drop on me.
How you got out of that?
I was more serious about what I was doing than they were. Some people carry guns, and some people use guns, and it's a difference. A lot of times a person that's just carrying a gun for protection, they really don't want to go all the way. They just want to protect themselves. And then you got people who are guns even without a gun. And it's a mentality that a person have, and you acquire it from hardship and being tested and demonstrating, a certain mindset in the streets.
That's so interesting. So now around age 18-ish, you've now amassed this reputation of being like very notorious, right?
Yes.
How, because I know you lived right in the projects, in Cypress Projects,
Yes.
that's where you're from. I always wondered, knowing that you were acquiring so many enemies, how did you feel comfortable just living right in the hood?
Actually, there was a time in my life when I cared, but there came a point in my life that I really didn't care. Even though I knew what I was doing was wrong and I had no business doing it, since a young age, I've acquired some serious enemies who are trying to take my life, put me in some really, really, really dangerous situations. And it became I just became a wanted man, but I also became a man who learned from the individuals who pursued me. And being wanted to me by law enforcement as well as my enemies became a natural thing. I felt better knowing that I had an enemy. So when things were calm for me, I didn't feel safe. I'd rather know that somebody is out there trying to take me out than to be out there thinking that everything is peaceful and somebody take me out. So being on point became a norm for me.
Gotcha. So now, I want to go 19-ish.
Okay.
What was one of the things that stand out around that time of your life that you did that was like something that would be very like distinguishable and people would talk about it and you kind of gained notoriety from it?
Everything. I was just an armed robber that was willing to do what other armed robbers wasn't going to do.
Was you just localized with this, or was you taking it from hood to hood?
I was from hood to hood, as far as Brooklyn was concerned.
Okay.
I was in Fort Greene with crimies. I was in Brownsville with crimies. I was in Crown Heights with crimies. I was in Tompkins Projects. I was in Sumner. I was in Marcy. I mean, I had, you know, in Brooklyn back then, we didn't have cell phones. We had phones that you answer. And we had the landlines. And
beepers?
No, this was even before
beepers. Okay.
This is before they even had beepers. Before we were using beepers. Maybe doctors used beepers.
Okay.
But the guys on the streets didn't. This was in the early 80s. And guys would just call me. You know, I'll sit home and guys will contact me and tell me they got a jokes, or they got a lick, or they got something that they need done. And they'll tell me, you know, what it is. And, you know, and that's what you'll do. And that's just how it was. It was an exchange thing.
So when they say Manhattan keeps on making it, Brooklyn keeps on taking it, they meant that.
Okay, I'm going to say the difference between Brooklyn and Manhattan, they make money. And Brooklyn is a lot of violence. In Manhattan, from what I know about Manhattan, because I have family that's from Manhattan. Manhattan is a place that do everything in their power to maintain law and order. Because people running around creating disturbances slows down and stop money. So Manhattan usually will have a group of individuals who are on the payroll to put out fires. And but they got their stick-up boys. They got their kidnappers. They got their murderers out in Manhattan. But it's usually more organized. Whereas in Brooklyn, it's chaotic. And
I think a little bit more unified in Manhattan too.
It's very unified.
Yeah, because it seemed like Brooklyn was just, y'all was going against each other
all day long.
Yeah.
And that's how I was raised when I was young. We were actually taught, you know, to go against each other. You know, that made the best man win. You know, the survival of the fittest. And it's a terrible concept and it's a terrible way of life. But when they make you believe that that's the law, that's what it is.
When did you first get arrested in your teenage years?
All right, the rest on books
and
14.
Well, I'm talking about between the periods of 17 and 20, because I'm leading up to like your first state bid.
Oh, okay. My first state bid, I went up in 1983.
For what?
But there was a combination of armed robberies.
Okay.
That I had since 1981. And you know, you catch crime, you do crimes, you get out on bail. Or sometimes you do crimes and when you eventually get busted, other crimes fall on you. So I did lay up on Rikers Island. I went upstate in 1983. My number was 83B2257. And my other state number when I went back up north was 88A1417. You never forget those numbers.
Mm-hmm. Being on Rikers Island, that was another training ground, correct?
Yes. It was basically like the projects.
Okay. How was your experience being on Rikers Island versus going upstate?
Being on Rikers Island.
Back then. It's a different island back then.
Yes. Being on Rikers Island in the early 80s, it was hectic. You know, it was a bunch of young, angry males, you know, full of testosterone. You had a lot of fighters, a lot of cats that was fighters. You had a lot of killers. You had a lot of hopeless people that wanted to take their pain out on other people. And it just was a melting pot of pain, misery, anger, madness. And
what category would you consider yourself as back then?
I was a level-headed militant. I was an individual who knew how to go into an environment and figure out a way to make it work for me.
Did you fight?
Yes, I did.
Did you encounter people that you had robbed on the streets?
Absolutely.
So
many people.
Was that hectic? Navigating through a world of enemies, basically.
It was actually normal. I expected to bump heads with enemies in jail.
Were you a fighter?
I did fight.
You were known. I heard you were known for being really good at using your hands.
Well, I boxed at PAL back in the 70s at Howard Houses.
Is that when you met Mike Tyson?
It's not where I met him, but that's where I did box with him too. He was under the same individual that I was under.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say you was a good boxer.
I was a decent fighter.
Okay.
You know, I mean, back then we had a lot of really great fighters. I mean, because fighting was the thing. In the 70s, and then martial arts and boxing was the thing. And most of your guys, you know, knew how to fight. They knew how to rumble. Yeah.
So when you were on the island, how many fights did you encounter?
I was kind of influential when I was young. So when you're influential, you fight, but you probably fight less. You know? And but I fought.
Okay.
I fought because there was some people that you just didn't see eye to eye with. And plus, even on Rikers Island, many of us guys, we took the show on the road. So we was in the streets, robbing and sticking up. When you come to jail, it don't change. You robbing people and you sticking up.
Oh, so you were still robbing people on the island?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just out of curiosity, without a gun, it's more strong arm at this point.
Right.
Correct? Okay. So you in a hallway, you see somebody with jewelry, you get them, or is it something that happens on the unit? Like, just break that down a little bit.
If somebody have what you want, it could be an armed robbery.
Oh, armed with the
With a
makeshift
weapon.
weapons that you guys make. Okay.
It could be armed, or it could be a straight up and down fight. You win, you take everything. You know, it could be a hyena move that you and a group of hyenas rule and run together, or a group of lions. And anybody that you'll see that is not part of who you are and what you do, y'all gonna take whatever they got.
So how long did you stay on Rikers Island, and when it was time to go upstate, now that's a different experience.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, upstate,
But how long did you stay on Rikers Island before you went upstate?
about maybe 14 to 18 months or something like that.
Okay. So that's gladiator school now.
Rikers Island?
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider it gladiator school.
Okay.
But it's training camp.
Okay.
It's training camp.
What did you get sentenced to when you went upstate? Your first state bid?
My first state bid, I got 2 2 to 6s. Because I got sentenced for the robbery on the bus. Well, I had actually 5 cases during that time. I had went to trial and beat the case. Another case got dismissed. And as a matter of fact, 2 cases got dismissed. I went to trial, 1. In 2 cases, I copped out 2.
Okay.
And the reason why I copped out because they took us from Brooklyn and took us back to Queens. And during that time, I had this serious judge. And you know what? I might be wrong. It was the prosecutor I had. His name was Santucci. I'll never forget. And when we got to Queens, the guys told us, yo, listen, you better hope you don't go to Queens Boulevard. And they sent us straight to Queens Boulevard. And they was like telling us, the guys from Queens was like, yo, listen, because y'all from Brooklyn, y'all committed crimes out in Queens and then came. Because what had happened is that the bus robbery with the guys that we did it to, they brought us back to Queens and found out that we also committed some other crimes out there. They had put 2 and 2 together. But one thing about Queens, if you cop out immediately, you could cop out to a case and still have a case. And we ended up copping out. And I copped out to a 2 to 6. And I also had another case. It was a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses that I copped out to also. Those people didn't even want to press charges. And but it was one of those situations that they were willing to let me go, but they told me that they were going to prosecute the guys that did the crime with me. And I told them, might as well send me up the river right with them.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I really thought that was in a later period of your life, but that was one of the most notorious, I want to say, crimes that people talk about when they think about you. And it was the fact that you robbed your mother's Kingdom Hall. Now, when I read about it, it stated that your mother was inside the Kingdom Hall and you robbed her as well. Please tell us about that, because I know it's a lot of misinformation and I want to hear the story from your point of view. Like, why did you even want to rob? Let's start there. Why would you even want to rob the Jehovah's Hall Witness Kingdom Hall where you was raised in, basically, right? Am I correct?
You're right.
Okay.
Well, I was born a Jehovah's Witness. And I had a lot of memories. And there came a point in my life when I was really, really angry with religion, with God, with my mother, with people in the church. You know, my thing was that I had, like I told y'all, I had a father who was a Marine, and he was an atheist. And he used to speak to us. And he felt that religion was like a drug. And that the people who are in charge of religion were like pimps. And in my young years, I didn't like listening to anything that he had to say, because me and my father didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. But he was a very intelligent man, but he was a very pragmatic individual. And I had some differences with people in the Kingdom Hall. And as a young person, I just felt like I made a lot of sacrifices. And that I put a lot on the line. And it came a point in my life when the elders within the Kingdom Hall had told my mother that I was going to be placed on public reproof. And public reproof, because I wasn't baptized, public reproof is when a person is ostracized or, put on the sidelines. Now, I wasn't a practicing Jehovah's Witness, but I used to see the witnesses. I used to speak to them. I would protect them and put my life on the line if it was necessary. And many of those people I did consider, like family, because I grew up in the faith. But it came a point when I was put on public reproof that they were told not to speak to me. And one of the things I disliked is that when someone could tell somebody to not communicate with somebody that they supposed to be cool with or friends with. And I honestly felt offended when I found out that, even though I knew I was out there in the streets and I knew I was doing wrong, what hurted me is my mother came to me and she told me not to communicate with her unless it's for something that was important, and that I was put on public reproof, and that she, being my mom, would also ostracize me. It hurted me, because it was my mother. And I understood, her admonishing me. I understood her even putting her hands on me. I understood her telling me what I could and could not do. But I wasn't going to take it from these people. And for quite a while, I sat back and I was really, really angry. And I'll never forget saying to myself, you know what? I want to do something that's going to prevent me from ever going back up into that place again. And I spoke to a couple of my boys. Concerning that matter. And most of my friends told me, and one of my friends in particular told me, that I was out of my mind and that I was going to go to hell if I committed a crime against those people. But I had my mind set. Like I said, I was angry with them. I felt that they came in between my mother and my father, you know, relationship. I felt that my mother loved them more than she loved us. I felt that I made a lot of sacrifices. And just to see that those people could turn on me just because someone who had rank told them to turn on me, I said, I'm gonna turn on them. And I constructed a plan. Got a couple of people to go on it with me. I made all my boys wear masks. I was the only person who went in barefaced. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know it was me. And I needed them to know that I didn't give up. I didn't care that I'm doing this. And I could care less about what anybody say or do. I'm TuT now. I'm an outlaw, and I could care less about what the repercussions are. And my mother was not there that day. My mother never missed a meeting. And I never revealed this. But the only reason my mother missed that meeting that day was because I put something in my mother's coffee that prevented her from waking up the day that I did that. And I'll never forget that day because it was myself and my friends. And as we stood across the street from my building, weapons in hand, I could see all the people in my building watching me, getting ready to go into this place and commit a terrible act. You know, I'm really sorry for what I did because it was the wrong thing to do. And just because someone ostracizes you, make you feel small or disrespected, you don't do something like that. But since I was a child, you know, those people always taught us kids that children are to be seen and not heard, and that we are to be obedient to our parents. Yet they wanted us to be just like them. And as I got older, you know, when I was young, there was nothing I could do. But as I grew and I started flexing my wings and I started living in according to the devil lifestyle, I felt that it was my time to show them that I was totally out and indifferent to what anybody felt or thought about me. And I'll never forget that when it was time for me to get sentenced for that crime, they did tell me I was forgiven. And they told me that they would drop the charges on me. And I told them, but what about my boys? And they said, no, they're going to jail. And I told them, if they go to jail, I'm going to jail. Because that's what I chose, and that's who I am. And I went to jail.
Thank you for sharing that. When you went upstate, now at this point, you've lived a life. When you get upstate, did you ever have any chance to calmly reflect on everything you've done, or was it more fighting, more robberies? How was that experience?
Well, when I went upstate, I wanted to come home. And because the sentence that I had, I knew that if I had to go to my conditional release date, I'll do about 4 years. So while I was upstate, before I went up, while I was on Rikers Island, I got my GED. And when I went upstate, I got myself an apprenticeship as an electrician helper. And I went through some things, but one of the things I always did was, it's funny too, because there was a point where I felt like I hated God, but there was also a point where I felt that I needed to know God. And I always was attracted to religion. And I think that my attraction to religion was based upon being able to know that I have a personal relationship with God. Because I tried to be an atheist. It didn't work. I tried to act like God didn't exist, and it just don't work for me. So what I did was that I found God in many different religions. You know, one thing about me is that I would read stuff on Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, you name it, yo. If it's something that could keep me captivated and something that I could study to improve myself, I'll use it.
So is that the point of your life where you entered into Islam?
Yes, that was, yes. During that time, I used to communicate with 3 brothers. One of them was from the Nation of Islam. Another one was a Sunni Muslim. And the other brother was a Shiite. And they all used to communicate with me. They had a lot of love for me. And we would speak about God and about various different religions. And like many of the brothers, I would go to the services to listen because they had a lot of positive information and they had structure. And a lot of times when you're out in the street, one of the things you don't have is structure. You know, you're moving around in an irresponsible manner, and you're just barbaric. And you really don't care what people think, say, or do. But with religion, because one of the things I used to say to myself is that I used to feel like I knew man. And a part of me felt that man was evil because of religion. And that the only person you could really trust is God. Because if man is evil by choice or by nature, you can't trust him. So my thing was, you know what, I'm gonna develop a relationship with God, but I'm a human being. And I know most of the time I live in my lower desires. I know most of the time I'm fearful. Most of the time I'm angry. Most of the time I got hate. Most of the time I got desires to do things and take things. So in my mind, I was like, I can't help myself. I need help. But I'm going to get it in the manner that I want it. And I'm going to take from whatever it is that I'm doing only what I need, hoping that I wouldn't be repeating like I did in the past.
Sounds like you were maturing as well on a state bed.
Well, during that time, I had a kid. I had this beautiful little daughter. And I just wanted to be a dad. I wanted to be a dad. And I wanted to be a good dad to her. She was a little girl. She was precious. She was just a beautiful little girl, man. And I wanted my daughter to be able to live a better life than me. She deserved it. Even if I didn't deserve it. And many times that's what motivated me to at least figure out ways to seem like a better person.
Is that when you were going by the name Mustafa?
Yes.
Okay. Also, I read that you had became an imam, and that blew my mind because that's like a high position in that religion. Am I correct?
You're correct. You're correct.
When you came home, what happened to drive you from that direction?
Well, sometimes, when I was in prison is a place where you never know what's going to happen. So I think that this is what happened. I'll never forget when I was reading about Al-Islam. I used to read about different battles that were in the Quran. I used to think about the fact that it emphasized that man was made from toil and struggle. And I remember there being different parts of the Quran that spoke about man, that spoke about human beings using witchcraft, that spoke about the oneness of God. And when I would think about those things, it made me realize that in life, the only knower of all things is God. There was a part of me that knew that I had to change because I wanted to be better for my daughter, because my son wasn't even born yet. But in becoming a better person for my daughter, I neglected something. I refused to be a better person for myself. Every time I came to prison, I always felt that my change was necessary for someone other than myself, for my mother, for my woman, for my child, but not for me. And when you work to better yourself for other people, and you don't take out the time to honestly become a better human being for yourself, all that work is for nothing. Because you ain't nothing but surface. In order to beat the streets, it got to be internalized. In order to become a better person, it got to be in the marrow. In order to honestly win against the devil, it got to be in the spirit. And I didn't have that. I used the Quran as if it was a book of war. It was like me reading Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, Miyamoto Musashi, or Clausewitz. I didn't realize that I had to internalize. And you know what? Because I wasn't willing to give up what I had deep inside, which was my fear and my pain, I couldn't put anything else in there because that had to be removed in order for something else to go in. So no matter how much Quran I read, no matter how many prayers I made, no matter how much I wanted to be a better human being, I was still TuT. And when I went back to society, he showed up. He showed up.
So now, when you came back to society, how old were you at that point?
When I came back to society, I was approximately 22 years old.
Okay. With your permission, can we end it now? Because I did say in the beginning we would do 17 to 20, and now we're at 22. So I think you gave you really went introspective with us tonight, and I thank you so much. We're at the 56-minute mark, and I want to stop now, and then when we return, we'll take it from there.
Okay.
All right, so this is part 3.
This is part 3.
Of Walter King TuT's life story.
Yes.
Thank you so much because you gave a lot.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Bebo.